So Trump responded to China's increase of their tariffs of an additional 34% above what they already had. Trump jacked it up on our side, on the American side, another 50%. So we have a trade war. China will lose the trade war. Their demographic situation is worse than ours. The Chinese, on average, are aging faster than Americans are. Their bubbles are more inflated than ours is. Yes, we have bubbles. The whole entire world has bubbles. But you got to remember, there's ghost cities in China. And they printed more yuan than the Americans have printed dollars. So, and the yuan is not internationally traded as widely, not nearly as widely as the US dollar is. So China is really in no position to wage a trade war. Most of their economic growth, their initial economic growth comes from exports. And most businesses, they just don't have a good reason to do the kind of business that they used to do in China. It used to be that China had a very large, low-skilled population that it was a cheap producer of everything. I mean, you could stamp something out for 5 cents per unit, and compared to everything else, and that's because of the fact that the wages were so low. China also had slave labor. They also had currency manipulation. All countries have currency manipulation, but they also had tariffs so that other countries couldn't access the market in China, but they sure as heck could access the market to everybody else. And in that environment, it made sense to set up shop in China because you could produce something relatively cheap, low skilled. You also had enough higher skilled people to run things, to do the programming. There were a few cultural drawbacks, obviously. They were known for stealing technology. They were also known for not being very autonomous. Like they weren't really good at individual problem solving, but that's a side issue. This is actually not smart on the Chinese side. This is probably something that they're doing, like they're playing a game of chicken. This is sort of propaganda, if you will, that they're trying to create. They're obviously putting pressure on the Trump administration, on the Americans in the Trump administration, to just drop the tariffs and continuously allow China to have their tariffs while the United States originally didn't have the tariffs on China. And mark my words, I made a prediction the last video that I talked about this. China will break. The Chinese will either back down, or if they don't, their economy will collapse. You can bet on it. Like I said, and I've repeated this over and over again, they are in no position to wage a trade war. So I'm not worried about this. A lot of commentators are saying, oh, trade war with the second largest economy in the world. That second largest economy in the world, in many ways, is a paper tiger. So yes, China means something. Yes, they are a major military power, major economic power still, but they're not, structurally, it's not as sound as it may look if you were to just look at maybe some of the facts. So if you dig a little deeper, they're not the cheapest producer of anything. They're not the most skilled producer. And like I stated before, they steal technology. So politically, it doesn't make as much sense as it used to. And their bubbles are teetering on popping and collapse more than anybody else's. So China would be smart to back down and try to negotiate a deal with Trump to then hopefully prolong their system a bit longer. But I think the leadership in China is insular. They're going to get a rude awakening. So, I mean, it's unfortunate for China, but like I said, mark my words, they will lose this trade war.